TIFU by attempting to sell a vibrator. I work in a sex store. It was a day like usual, selling merchandise, informing people about toys, telling tourists to stop molesting the display masturbators, and not record in the store, the whole shebang. It was a rather quiet day and my coworker and I were following the news as protesters had blocked the streets of Amsterdam with barricades, spray painting the buildings and taking stones out the streets and throwing them at cops. The whole time, we were talking about the people who live inside the vandalized and barricaded buildings and the troubles that would come if they needed emergency help. A customer came up to us and needed help with one of the little one vibrator. Sure, okay, not a big fan of them because they very quickly overheat when they get plugged into the wall. But this one is battery powers. Do what could go wrong, right? I went to turn the vibrator and nothing. So I did what any sensible person would do and unscrewed the bottom to look what was wrong with the batteries and to change them if needed. I got to look for maybe 3 seconds at a displaced wire in the toy before it exploded and launched a broken battery at my head. I lost all my professionalism right then and there and launched a series of cuss words that would make a sailor blush before handing the job over to my coworker to wash off my hands. When I did and walked back, I realized that my eyes started to have a really painful burn, so I walked back upstairs, made myself a wet cloth for on my eye and went back into store to grab an intact toy for the regional manager to tell them what happened with it, while also immediately warning my friends to stay the fuck away from any type of one vibrator and explain the reasons stated above. I hadn't had time to call the manager yet when my boyfriend called me to tell me to immediately go to the hospital due to the possibility of battery acid. I told him I'm fine and I'll look into it when I got to the doctor in my hometown and our way. This is important for later. I hung up the phone and called the manager to tell them what happened and what toy it was. They also told me to go to the hospital, and I told them that I didn't want my coworker closing solo as Amsterdam can be scary for a woman alone at night. Both the manager and my coworker and my manager urged me to go to the hospital as she will be fine and lives close by. I grabbed most of my stuff and went out to go to the nearest hospital. When I read the central station, I asked one of the cops nearby for directions to the nearest emergency room and took the subway to the hospital. While in there, I called my mother to inform her that I was going to be home later as I was going to the emergency room. She and my dad got in the car and told me they would meet me there. I got to the emergency room maybe 10 minutes after that and waited for my turn. Meanwhile, the room was filled with protesters that were met with the police force and were now there because of mild injuries. Worst that was, there was a bruised wrist. I had the doctors look at my eye and they told me that they didn't have the right equipment and to wait in another doctor's room until they had time, but they also told me to call to get an appointment as that would maybe speed up my waiting time. So I did. I waited, and waited. Eventually my parents arrived, and at that time I had been on hold for 30 minutes, jumping from place 38 to place 14, waiting to at least speak to someone about my eyes. So my dad came with the idea to see if the emergency room in my hometown would be quicker to respond. And wouldn't you know it, they were. So I hung up the phone and drove there. When I got there, they once again took a look at my eye, dropped some yellow liquid in my eye and checked with a black light, and prescribed me an antibiotic cream. Had my parents drove me home and went to bed. Now that I woke up, I can finally see from that eye. But yay, don't buy a one vibrator. They're not safe.